Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Leadership in Action. And this is a LinkedIn Live that we do every Thursday for 15 minutes, and we talk about leadership topics. My name's Paula Byrne. I'm the CEO of Orca HR Solutions, and I'd like to introduce my great partner, Renee Matthew, who's a senior partner with Orca HR Solutions. Last week, we talked about coaching, and we talked a little bit about the skills that are required in coaching, from using questioning, and not just any type of questioning, but sort of more provocative questions, listening, and empathy. And now we're going to sort of bring those skills forward and talk a little bit about coaching for performance. And what does that really look like? So sometimes people just think about coaching performance being an event-based thing. So you do it at a particular meeting, or you do it at a performance review. But this is really around sort of taking a coaching approach every day in terms of how you engage and you inspire your people to be their best. So Renee, when you think about, sort of that sort of daily culture of coaching, what sort of comes to mind?
Yeah, I think what you said was a good point about being a one-time event. So usually during performance review time. Uh, but the daily culture of coaching is, for me, really about empowering people to learn in real time. Oftentimes in the kind of that real time, people will point out mistakes, or they'll have conversations of what could be better, but it still comes from the advice giving side, or the, pointing out what you did wrong. And as the receiver or the employee talking to their manager, we also come from that side, just because of how the brain operates, focusing on the negative. And so I always think of coaching for performance as a daily ongoing, uh, asking the open-ended questions, and having a little bit of a collaborative nature to it, to get insight from the team, to have everybody give their input, but then from the leader perspective, also really identifying for themselves and the team, like, what is each person's individual strength and what do they bring to the table most naturally, and what they're skilled at.
Yeah, I think the whole thing about advice, I think there's actually somebody who writes about, and I think they talk about the advice monster, that look, so
Yeah.
it's kind of like your natural tendency to want to give advice, or
Uh-huh.
to problem solve, like
Yeah. And it,
not problem solve, but to solve the problem, which is different than problem solving. To solve
yes.
the problem for somebody, you know,
Yeah.
because you're either determined to get the problem solved, to do it kind of quickly, do it in real time.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the challenge when, if I, as a leader, if I'm continuously giving my advice or telling my people what to
Yeah.
do, what are some of the challenges, either short term or long term, that can have?
I was just having this conversation last night with someone about the disservice of um, the coaching model being turned into the advice, because often people will conflate the two and say, oh, I'm a coach, but all they're doing is giving advice. And so the way I describe it to people is, if I'm coaching you, Paul, and I'm telling you, oh, you should do this, 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 and this, that advice is coming from whatever you've told me about what's going on, either personally or professionally. Well, if you leave out information, and people will leave out information because it's so natural to them that they don't even think to tell someone, because they just, either they don't know they're doing it, or they just assume everybody knows a piece of information, or there are things that can be true that are not in your awareness. And if it's not in your awareness and you don't share that, the advice I give you may take a completely different direction had I had those one or two pieces of information. So that can be a real disservice. And if you're telling someone what to do and then they go do the thing, they're just going to keep coming back to you. Now, what do I do next? And you're not empowering them to uh, be intrinsically motivated, think for themselves, So you want to make sure that when you're asking the questions, that's where the deeper transformation and perspective shifts can happen, is when they come up with it themselves. Because in the coaching model, we believe that anybody coming to coaching is whole, resourceful, creative. You've got everything you need, but sometimes you just can't read the label from inside the jar. You're too close to everything, that it takes that third party objective person to pull us out, ask the right questions so we can see things a little differently.
Yeah, I think one of the points here, if I'm telling you what to do and I'm giving you the solution, who really owns it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, might be a good short-term fix, but
Yeah.
long-term
Yeah, but I'm
sustainability.
not really owning it. You're kind of giving it to me. I'm not owning it or taking maybe even
Yeah,
sometimes accountability and responsibility. And
yeah,
that's one of the things I think that happens a lot in performance management and performance challenges
yeah.
is that the manager wants to fix the problem or the leader
Hmm.
wants to fix the problem, right? So they give the fix
Yeah,
to the individual, right?
yeah,
But when the individual walks away, sometimes they're not the one who's actually owning that solution or owning the problem
yeah,
themselves. And that's
yeah.
why it's really important, the whole sort of ownership aspect. And we'll talk a little bit later in the session about that. And there's a structured model around how you can actually have some of those conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, what is one of the other challenges? Like, if you think about if you're a leader and you're the one who's just telling or, even solving some of the problems for people, what are some of the longer term impact it might even have on your team or your organization?
Well, something I see often that kind of relates to what you just said about the ownership is if the leader is telling and the team isn't stepping up and taking accountability, then it causes a great deal of stress and burden on the leader because they're holding all the things and they feel like they need to tell everybody everything. And so you're creating more um, problems for yourself and increasing your overwhelm can tend to happen, and burnout can tend to happen because if you have 10 people reporting to you and you have to tell everybody different things and or ask them like, have you solved this problem yet, or have you done this thing? um, when you move towards that coaching culture, then you have people coming and motivated and coming to you and either sharing what they're doing or running it by you and collaborating. It's a totally different feel.
Yeah, and I think one of the other challenges, one of the other, I think, one long time problems in, your team, your organization, you're not really developing their
Mm,
skills or their
mm-hmm,
competencies,
mm-hmm.
So what happens, yes, and you might be even a high performing in terms you got a lot of stuff done very short term. Now you leave that organization. What might
Mm-hmm.
happen then to the people?
Yeah, the people that are leaving.
Well, I'm a leader and I'm leave and I'm the person who's been
Oh,
telling everybody to do anything.
yeah,
What happens then to the team? So
yeah,
they don't have
yeah,
anybody to tell them anymore,
yeah. And then a new leader
right?
steps in, and it's like,
The
why
new
isn't my
leadership
team
in,
doing
right?
anything?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
so sometimes what can happen is when you have an organization where you've had a very strong leader who can be very good at sort of directing and telling, and maybe even getting stuff done short term. When they
Hmm.
leave, the organization doesn't have resilience or the skill sets to even continue. You
And
know?
it's like you're starting over too,
Yeah.
right? Because they're just kind of like deer in headlights, or yeah. Hmm.
And an example, I had a conversation with one of the leaders that I was working with just yesterday, and we were talking about, one of the challenges he has with one of his leaders, and I was saying, well, so what happens when, he doesn't get something done that you expect him to do? And so what do you think he might have said?
Repeat the question again.
So what
Uh,
happens when one of your leaders isn't getting something done that you expect them to do?
ah, that depends on the leader,
Yeah, I'll
right?
give you so
Yeah,
literally, what he said, well, what I'll do is I will go in and then I will sort of meet with him and then I will tell him how we need to do this and I will
Yeah.
take over.
I was gonna say that would be the leader would just do it, you know?
Yeah, he will just
Yeah.
do it. And then I
Hmm.
asked him the question, what is the downside of you doing that? I
Yeah.
said, what's the upside? Well, the upside is we get it done,
You
right?
done. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And he said, well, and I said, well, what's the downside of that? Well, so, and he sort of reflected on that question and he realized that the downside of it is that the individual isn't taking over the ownership of actually
Yeah.
getting it done and may not even be developing their skills in that particular area where they may have a particular weakness or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes the leader will put that onus on the person on the team, but it's also like as a leader, where's the responsibility lie for the leader? Because I think of it with like kids, sometimes it's just easier to do it yourself.
Yeah.
But then the the like unspoken message that you're sending to your leader is, I don't think you can do it.
Yeah.
And then the person is like, well, he'll do it anyway. So then and it's
It's
all kind
kind of
of
like a
subconscious.
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, yeah. And then the cycle
Yeah.
just keeps repeating itself.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the things is just, in the minutes we have left, I was thinking that, there's a model that is used in coaching that helps people go through a sort of structured way of having a coaching conversation, especially when it's one of those conversations where you have maybe a performance issue or something is not, quite meeting the expectations that you had expected. And it's called the GROW model, and this is sort of a very popular model. And so it starts off with, if I had, a challenge with you, I might say, Renee, I want to have a conversation around how we can do better on X, Y, and Z. Okay, so I'm going to
Hmm.
be very clear up front around what the purpose is. And then I might say to you, Renee, this is my perspective on the situation. This is what I'm seeing. But before I jump to any conclusions, I would want to get your perspective. And so
Hmm.
this is what's called the reality. And
Hmm.
so you might say, well, yes, I think you may have some of this wrong because, here are some facts you don't have, right? And
Hmm.
so the second stage of that then is, okay, I would say, well, okay, now I know your reality and I know my reality, and maybe they're not the same. So how do we come to an agreement on, okay, well, that's very good information you've given me, Renee. And I also have this perspective. Now we can get to what's called options of looking at, okay, what are particular ways that we could go forward? And so we have a conversation about options. And so we might be able to explore ideas. The thing is, some people will go straight to either options or get to, okay, here's what I want you to do. And they don't
Do.
go through any of these steps.
Hmm.
The challenge about that is you haven't even had an opportunity. So you're not really committed to even what
Yeah.
comes out of me,
Well,
right?
and if you're speaking two different languages and
Exactly. Yeah.
same word, different,
Exactly. Yeah.
perception
So
of it.
that's why having a clear goal in mind,
Hmm.
understanding our realities and bringing those two together, having options, but then the most important, the W is kind of working it. And now, okay, who's taking ownership of this
Hmm.
and by when? And
Yeah.
so with this grow model, you're going through a sort of a 4-step process, but the objective is to start off with a coaching, one being clear around what the goal is, but having coaching conversations about exploring, inquiry, curiosity around reality. And now
Yeah.
we can sort of explore options. But when we come out of this meeting, we're going to be clear, what you're taking ownership.
Yeah. And again, to reiterate, this is not the model that you take on at performance review time. It's an
No, this is a
ongoing
model that you can have for any kind
co-
of
on
conversation.
and on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't do it in, the one that's okay, my God, I've ignored this like
Yeah.
over and I now have to have this tough performance conversation, which I'm
Yeah.
not prepared. This can be every day. Hey, you know, here's kind of what I observed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me know what your reality is. I'd love to get your
Hmm.
perspective. Let's
Hmm.
discuss options of how we can move forward,
Hmm.
right? And then how do we work it? So that's a model that can be very helpful in just sort of creating that sort of coaching culture as opposed to waiting for performance reviews or whatever.
Yeah.
But it gives you a four-step process. So
So good.
unfortunately, we're out of time. Again, great conversation, Renee, around something that I know is both dear to both of our hearts in terms of having these conversations. So thanks very
Yeah.
much, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks.